Support WrestleTalk!
MJF is your new AEW World Champion, Jamie Hayter is your new AEW Interim Women's World Champion, and the Elite are not your new AEW World Trios Champions. It's time for my review of AEW Full Gear 2022 in about 10 minutes, and boy howdy, this show sure was noteworthy for many reasons, almost all of them positive. Firstly, I just wanted to note how different the vibe was for this show than it has been for a lot of AEW programming as of late. I know that's a really hard thing to quantify or explain, but genuinely watching it just felt like it was a big time show, and it managed to recapture some of the old pre-Brawl Out AEW feeling once again. Looking back on All Out now, the fallout from it was a pretty dark time for AEW, but I'm hoping that this show will be the show that kickstarted the comeback to form for the company when people look back on this period in time. There were 3 0-hour matches on this show, the first being Chaos with a very evil, very mysterious tag team partner versus The Factory, which really was a way to get evil Danhausen on our screens. I quite enjoyed the reveal, and the more serious side of him combined with the flurry of offense he got when he returned was a nice breath of fresh air for Danhausen, who's changed up the character before it got stale, which is nice to see wrestlers being ahead of the curve. The second was Ricky Starks versus Brian Cage in the AEW World Title Eliminator Tournament, which Starks won in a fine enough match with Starks fighting back from behind. And the third was Eddie Kingston versus Jun Akiyama, which was a very fun bout of stiff striking and no selling, and it was lovely. Kingston got the win with the spinning back fist and was very emotional throughout and after the match, where he then improvised a promo to make people buy the pay-per-view because he's the best. The main show kicked off with Jungle Boy Jack Perry versus Luchasaurus in a steel cage, which was a banger of an opener. This was designed to be Jungle Boy's real arrival as a single star, the statement maker, and I think it achieved that goal. He bled early on, which only aided in the underdog story of Luchasaurus' offense. Christian Cage attempted to get involved when he opened the cage door, allowing Luchasaurus to get weaponry such as a couple of chairs and a table before the door was shut again. I'm not a huge fan of the cage being opened, as I feel it can really undermine the point of being locked inside the cage, but I'm glad it was at least quickly resolved and the rest of the match took place in the ring. After some stellar near falls, Jungle Boy managed to win by hitting an elbow drop off the top of the cage through a table and got Luchasaurus to tap in the snare trap for the win. This was a great way to kick off the show, kept people energized throughout, and reminded people that this duo in AEW's history in particular were beacons of joy and positivity. Right after that, we had Death Triangle versus the Elite, and hot damn guys, let us breathe. The Elite made their return after All Out, and boy did they make an entrance, complete with Carry On My Wayward Son to accompany their now complete babyface turn. And make no mistake, they were full-on babyfaces here, complete with CM Punk chants from the crowd. They felt reinvigorated, and perhaps the extra 3 months off for Kenny in particular was actually a blessing in disguise for his niggling injuries. And the action in this match was super fast-paced and incredibly enjoyable, again managing to remind AEW fans that these two trios were 6 of the more prominent wrestlers that made AEW the hottest North American wrestling product in 2021. In what I would consider a pretty shocking result though, Death Triangle held on to the belts, with character work making up the reason. Pac tried to tempt Phoenix to use the ring bell hammer earlier in the match, but Phoenix refused until much later on, when again Pac tried to convince Phoenix to use it, this time after they were on the ropes and it seemed like they were going to lose. Kenny got Phoenix up for the one-winged angel, but Phoenix used the hammer and rolled up Kenny to retain. I think this was actually a wonderful decision. It continues the story Death Triangle had going, doesn't immediately make them feel like an afterthought once the Elite come back to town, and might put to rest some concerns fans had about Death Triangle just being placeholder champions. To top it off, they then announced they were doing a best of 7 series with Death Triangle versus the Elite, which could potentially stretch into January if need be. And hot diggity dog, I am not opposed to this at all. Jade Cargill then successfully defended her TBS belt against Nyla Rose in a decent little match, which picked up the pace towards the end, with the pair stealing each other's finishes. But of course, Rose eventually succumbed to Cargill's Jaded, as per usual. Up next was the 4-way for the Ring of Honor Championship, with Chris Jericho defending the belt against Claudio Castagnoli, Bryan Danielson, and Sammy Guevara. I really enjoyed this match, primarily for the story beats it told, with Danielson and Claudio working together initially before turning on each other, Guevara and Jericho working together initially before turning on each other, and a great bit where where it looked like Guevara made amends with Jericho, only to hit him with the GTH and a shooting star press for a near fall, which was pretty slick. Jericho retained with a Judas effect on Claudio, but it was a fun affair regardless. Saraya had her return match against Britt Baker next, which was alright. She mentioned herself that she was shaking off the ring rust, and you could tell a little bit as there seemed to be a couple of miscommunications and awkward bits, but overall, it was still decent enough. Saraya got the win with 2 rampages, or Reyes is, I guess, now, and it was lovely to see her wrestling again. Welcome back, Saraya. Wardlow defended his TNT belt against Samoa Joe and Powerhouse Hobbs next, which was a bunch of big lads doing big lad things. There seemed to be a touch of nerves or something with a couple of the spots in the match, but overall this was also pretty fun. The finish of this match was pretty much exactly what I thought it would be, but with different people. Wardlow managed to hit some power bombs onto Hobbs, but Joe took out Wardlow and choked out Hobbs for the win to become double champ. I thought it was going to be Hobbs taking advantage of Wardlow attacking Joe, telling the story of Wardlow losing the belt because of his hyper-fixation on Joe, but this is still an interesting choice for sure. Samoa Joe as TNT champ is not something I'm going to complain about, and I'm curious to see what happens with his reign as the Wardlow stuff doesn't feel over with, but also I don't know how much mileage it has, honestly. Sting and Darby Allin had a tag match, so you know that means it's going to be the most wildly entertaining sports entertainment match on the card, and it was. Lethal and Jarrett played their parts well, but honestly, the standout of this match was Satnam Singh, who caught Darby Allin doing a coffin drop from like 25 feet up off the stage, off a ladder. It was wild. He also did an awesome looking chokeslam to Sting, but he was taken down by a combination coffin drop and scorpion death drop by the babyfaces, and Darby Allin got the win on Lethal after Sting countered a lethal injection into a scorpion death drop. Silly, stupid fun. Toni Storm defended her interim belt against Jamie Hayter next, in a match where the crowd absolutely wanted to see Hayter walk out as champ and booed anything that indicated Storm might win on principle. This was a great match in terms of action, with the pair really getting to showcase their wrestling ability, which, if you haven't been keeping track, is quite a lot. There were near falls, Rebel got involved and Hayter got a near fall, Baker stomped Storm onto the belt and Hayter got a near fall, and then Baker got involved again and Hayter got a near fall, and then Baker started taking off the turnbuckle pad, which of course meant that she was going to unintentionally cost Hayter the match, except she didn't. Hayter knocked Baker off the turnbuckle, but then Storm was the one who hit the exposed turnbuckle, with Hayter hitting the Ripcord clothesline to become the new interim women's champion. I am so glad AEW made this choice. They really listened to the fans, and it feels vindicating to think that Hayter got organically over just because she's really good, and they pulled the trigger while she was hot. It's these sort of decisions that will help recover the goodwill for the company that has kind of been chipped away at over the past couple of years. However, I'm not a huge fan of how overbooked this was, with Rebel and Baker and all the interference, but I'm super happy with the result, so I can't be too mad, I guess. Speaking of acts that got organically over, the Acclaimed defended their tag belts against Swerve in Our Glory, where we had the second instance in the night of a heel wrestler trying to convince their babyface tag partner to use a foreign object in a match. But it worked both times and we had different outcomes, so it's fine. Swerve went full heel in this one, trying to use the pliers on Max Caster, but Billy Gunn came out to make the save, so instead Swerve tried to make Keith Lee use the pliers, but he refused, throwing them aside and walking out of the match entirely, leaving Swerve defend for himself, which he didn't, with the Acclaimed retaining. This was also some nice character development, and you know I'm all about that. Keith Lee versus Swerve Strickland sounds really tasty to me though, so give me more of that please. And now we can have FTR go after the Acclaimed and the tag belts. Right? Right, TK? You're gonna book that now, right? And then it was time for the main event, MJF versus Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. MJF was the babyface, mostly, in this match, with him playing up the babyface pops he was getting, having an injury spot and working from behind, and Moxley playing the heel, flipping off the crowd, working down MJF the whole time with a smile on his face. I thought the action itself was mostly fine, nothing too special to write home about, apart from the one time where Moxley pile-drived MJF through a table on the outside, and hit a top rope paradigm shift for an awesome near fall, but you know, that's minor details or whatever. The psychology was great though, and it all led to the dramatic climax. The referee was of course knocked down, and MJF went to use the diamond ring, but stopped when William Regal came out and told him not to. He threw the ring away, but walked into Mox, and then there was another ref bump. Mox choked out MJF, MJF tapped, but the ref was still out. Regal barked at Mox to rouse the referee, but in the moment he moved away to get him, Regal slid MJF the brass knucks. He clocked Mox with the knucks, and 1, 2, 3, MJF is your new AEW World Champion. This is yet another case of the fans can see where the story is going, and that's okay. Not every fan had seen this turn coming, of course, but I'd seen it as a popular theory online. And yet again, this feels like a reward to those fans who cared enough to speculate and fantasy book. It's vindication and reward for getting involved, and that's something that honestly AEW has been lacking lately. The pairing of MJF and Regal sounds incredibly juicy, and I for one am really looking forward to their segments to see what happens next. I personally was really invested in the MJF babyface turn and seeing what it would do to MJF to win the title the right way, only to then realize it doesn't make him feel better, but that's just me. This is still a very fun outcome and a very, very well told story. The only casualty here really is the Blackpool Combat Club, which seems to have lost all steam from when they first formed, which is a real shame, as for me it had the potential to be one of my favorite factions in AEW history, if not wrestling history, but alas, we'll see how they recover from this when Dynamite rolls around. Regardless, this was a hugely noteworthy show for the title changes that happened, the title changes that didn't happen, heel turns, tag teams breaking up. It had it all going on. I was entertained from start to end, and while I will still say there are too many matches on this card and not enough breathing room between them, it doesn't matter as much when there's this caliber of wrestling without a misstep in the whole show. Full Gear 2022 is an easy 5 out of 5. Also, shout out to this guy who had a support WrestleTalk sign in the crowd. You're awesome.
For almost 3 years, AEW was the biggest babyface in wrestling. They had 5-star in-ring matches, they had long-term storytelling, and they had all your favorite wrestlers that WWE had fired. But then, the most perfectly executed double turn since Bret Hart and Stone Cold at WrestleMania 13 happened. Tony Khan accidentally turned his entire promotion heel.